Hey guys and girls, welcome. In this video I want to talk about Senran Kagura 7. This ended up being a hugely long video. I will just leave an index here showing all the topics, so you can just jump to the one you're interested with. Please understand that English is not my native language and I struggle with it, so I recommend that you turn the subtitles on. Without further ado, let's go! I will give my thought of the series at the end of the video. To be honest, I was one of the guys that at first glance just thought that the game was boobs and that's it. But believe me, it's a lot more than anime titties. Let's first focus on Senran Kagura 7 and put things in context for newcomers. I will try to keep things simple. Senran Kagura 7 was announced on August 1st of 2017. It was set to launch on fall in 2018. Everything seemed to be fine, until, well, something unexpected did happen. Sony censorship policy kicked in sometime in 2018, which made Senran Kagura Burst Renewal, a remake of the first game that's on the 3DS, get delayed from its original 2018 release date. The game ended up releasing in early 2019. Mainly, the Censored PS4 version removed Intimacy mode. It's an optional mode that's available in the dressing room. Now, removing Intimacy mode it's not a big deal. It is basically a mode where you can touch the characters in game and that's it. The problem for some people is that the Censored version isn't any cheaper for cutting content, while the PC Steam version has the same price for the full game. Also, most of the comments are completely against censorship and want the full game, which of course makes sense. One can say, okay, we lost intimacy stuff, but the game is still the same at its core, so future release will just be like burst renewal and we will be okay. Sadly, that's not the case at all. On December 1st on 2018, it was reported that Sony policies were impacting the overall Senran Kagura 7 development. Now, it just wasn't enough with the removal of intimacy. Kenichiro Takaki said that they are trying to launch the game, even with Sony restrictions. In order to do this, they are reconsidering ideas, rethinking concepts. Does this mean that development has been reset similar to what happened to Metroid Prime 4? Not necessarily. Rethought isn't exactly remade. I use the following differentiation for this case. Remade. Concept being done from scratch specially for Sony's policies, ditching the original. Rethought. Original concept but tweaked to meet Sony's policies while at the same time trying to keep them the closest as possible to the original intended one. Takaki never explicitly said that development was restarted from scratch, but rather they are adapting the ideas in ways that cannot be misunderstood. Some evidence that also supports this is that he doesn't want to completely remove the fanservice element from Senran Kagura. He admits that it's still possible to make great games without much sexualization, but he's not sure how to make this fit with Senran Kagura. This part is actually quite interesting, and it's something I would like to talk later. So, in other words, he's not exactly against of releasing a Senran Kagura game without fanservice, but rather it would be a bit weird, since it's something that's already integrated into the series core. And yeah, some character personalities and some elements such as Katsuragi would be completely destroyed. It wouldn't be Senran Kagura anymore, or at least not the original one we know. So for him removing all of that stuff and remake the ideas isn't a very good option. After this, in another interview, he was asked, since he left MadWorld by then, if he was still in charge of Senran Kagura, in which he replied saying that he's still the producer of Senran Kagura and he will finish 7, but currently it's mainly working in Senran Kagura New Link, which is a mobile game. This means that 7 development was stopped by Takaki's part. At the very least, it's not focusing much on it. My personal thought is that he's waiting for the censorship situation to calm down a bit before progressing with the game, since we have no news about it. So basically that's the situation. 7 is in a kind of development hell state. Takaki can progress smoothly with the games because of the censorship restriction, so he's now focusing on New Link mainly. Also, we pretty much don't have any news about 7 aside of the Asuka's model, which makes me think again that Takaki is waiting for the situation to calm down. However, we are entering in the domain of uncertainty. We don't even know if Sony will drop its restrictions, and it seems unlikely. Fans made a petition for that and it reached Sony. However, they answered and didn't care much about what the fans really wanted. Now, Sony new policy are a bit weird. What do I mean? Well, they just are informal. Sony is perfectly aware that PlayStation has lots of Japanese developers making fanservice games, so I don't know. They could have just done some warning before making the policy change, or at the very least, they could just put the policy in action but let developers that were doing games prior to a new policy finish their projects. It's pretty much unfair the way they implemented them. And that's not all. The policy kicked in a random day, suddenly, but they also forced Japanese devs to plead for their approval in English instead of Japanese, which makes it even harder for them. If this is not enough, Sony doesn't even have specific rules in what's okay and what needs to be censored. They didn't even offer written guidelines for this, they just want for you to finish your hard work for them, saying censor this, remove that, etc. Further raising the game cost and producing delays. Also, yes, they don't even know what's okay for them and what's wrong. The censor is pretty inconsistent between games. Devil May Cry 5 was censored in both America and Europe, but later Sony allowed the American version to be uncensored while keeping the Europe one censored. Or the famous case of Nora, Princess and Stray Cat. The game got a sequel that revealed much more than that image, and yet PS4 this time it's equal to the Switch version. Now, I don't really get this, and this is why I call it informal. The way they implement this is an utter disaster. They have a reason for this censorship though. And no, it doesn't really involve the kids. Basically, since the PS HQs are in California now, they are changing because they are afraid of having to deal with legal action brought by movements like Me Too. They went with the better be safe than sorry route and started to tone down games in a weird way as explained earlier. Sony used multiple excuses for the censor stuff in the past, but this actually seems to be their true reason about their new policies. So far, 7 has two approaches to follow with the info we currently have. 1. Censor the game as much as needed until Sony is satisfied with it and allow the game to be released on the PS4. 2. Suspend the development until Sony decides to be less stricter with its policies and allow the game to be released on the PS4 with minor tweaking. It's worth noting that the first route has risk of getting the game cancelled. As it was stated earlier, Takaki is not sure about removing the sexy element from Senran Kagura, since it's within the game essence. He wants to release a game that is up to his expectation of Senran Kagura. While the environment was different, Scalebound after getting delayed got cancelled due to being below Microsoft expectations. Microsoft preferred to cancel the game instead of releasing something that was below the hype it generated and then disappoint everyone. The same can happen to 7. The game might not be up to Takaki's expectations and might get cancelled if it ends being not very good. Since he's not focusing on 7 currently, it makes sense to think that he's not willing to tone the games down, possibly to its detriment, just to comply with Sony's policies and release a game that is not what Takaki wants. Otherwise, we will already have stuff about the story, gameplay, etc. All toned down of course, so it complies with Sony's policies. But we don't have that. We just have the same work in progress message, which makes me think that the game is actually in that state because Takaki refused to have something below his expectations. Actually, Takaki was asked about moving the game to Steam, in which he replied that it could be an option, but the problem is that PC already has lots of shooters that will eclipse 7 due to being a niche game, so PC only can be difficult. As far as I can notice, Takaki sees PC like a complement platform rather than a mainline one. This makes sense considering that Senran Kagura games come to PC after the PS4 version or PS Vita. So yes, the situation is difficult indeed. The first approach can be easily done because Takaki isn't sure about having Senran Kagura games without one of its core elements. Takaki is trying to avoid that route, otherwise he would already reported that the game removed a bunch of stuff or simply news about the game such as gameplay, characters, a bit of a story, something about what the game actually is, because we are not even sure what the game will be about. It's likely that they are following the second approach. Takaki is focusing his resources in New League mainly and keeping in mind that his desire is to bring the game as untouched as possible, and the lack of new, it makes me think that this is the path they are following. The question is, are these the only path they can follow for this? Actually, there is a third path they can use. It has been said that Steam doesn't restrict developers in the content of their games, they let them do whatever they want. Thing is, Steam alone is not a viable option, or at least in Takaki's eyes. It's risky, so then we have another company that can play a role here, Nintendo. Taking a third approach, they can actually replace a PS4 version with a Nintendo Switch one. Now, Nintendo was known to have a strong family-friendly policies, and that is true, but they've lost them since the Nintendo 64 exclusive Conker Bad Fur Day game. The developers themselves stated at the time that they had to remove very little content from the original ideas, and say that 99.9% of the game remained. Conker was an exclusive N64 game at the time. Nintendo only loosened its policies even more from then. Even BMX XXX was some kind of bike game that had topless nudity. The PS2 version was censored while the GameCube and Xbox versions were. MadWorld was a pretty violent game, with a bunch of bad words and blood, yet it was a Wii exclusive. A Nintendo spokesman replied to the MadWorld controversies, basically saying that the Wii was a platform for everyone, and not just childs. They allow content for every public, and that it's the ASRB job to rate the game and make it fit accordingly with the age. In other words, Nintendo didn't censor games even in the Wii era. They believed in the age rating system rather than Sony's initial censor excuse for protecting the children. And actually, things should work like Nintendo said. The ASRB exists for some reason, and it's nonsensical to censor mature aim games. It only makes sense to do so when your game reaches the AO+ rating and you are forced to tone it down to get the mature rating, just like it happened with Manhunt 2. Moving on to the Wii U and Switch, Nintendo even published Bayonetta 1 and 2. The latter one becoming a Wii U exclusive since Nintendo also funded its development. We are talking of a game where you kill angels and demons and you can torture them with combos, blood is shown, and not to mention that Bayonetta also gets naked when fighting. Let's also remember that Nintendo also allowed the devs to have Nintendo themed clothes for Bayonetta. Also, Shuntaro Furukawa, Nintendo's president, doesn't believe that censoring third-party games is good. Actually, he thinks it's bad for the industry, and he firmly believes that third-party rating systems such as the ESRB is the way to go for content regulation. Final words on the topic to move on already. Senran Kagura was a game being born on the 3DS, a Nintendo console. The original concept of the game was even to show boobs in 3D, a 3DS characteristic. Takaki even talked about what Nintendo thought about the game, and holy hell, they reacting in a very similar way than me. He even said that Nintendo didn't put actual restriction on what he can do and what he can't do, but even so, he felt nervous at first. In the end, Nintendo did understand the series and Deep Crimson progressed without any issues. Not only that, but Nintendo has also begun to perceive Senran Kagura in an even more positive way after the series sold well on its platform, to the point of saying something like, "Go Takaki, let's do it," according to him. Alright, with all of this information, it's safe to say that the game shouldn't have censor issues by the platform holder on Switch, especially when Reflection is basically intimate smooth but in its own game. Now, there are a lot of questions raised with the Nintendo Switch path. I will answer them one by one. Some people were wondering about a Sony exclusivity deal with mainline Senran Kagura games. This is a good question, but I have the feeling that no contract is in place actually, and the evidence goes to another Takaki interview where he says to actually be interested in releasing Senran Kagura games on Xbox One. And he says he would like to start with BBS, which is the latest entry of the main Senran Kagura games. He chose BBS because he says it can fit well on Xbox because it's a third-person shooter. So here you have it. In case exclusivity deal was taking place, that declaration will not be possible. Also remember that Takaki said that launching the game on PC only was theoretically possible. Also, from my point of view, it wouldn't make sense to sign a contract to censor your own exclusive game, to the point where its release is delayed. It's not financially viable. Another concern is the Switch's power. Now, I have had this debate a lot of times and from my point of view, it's something that doesn't make much sense to discuss, mainly because we don't really know a thing about 7. We don't know how the gameplay is, we don't know how the overall graphics are, we don't know anything. Discussing that, in my opinion, is like discussing the Nintendo Switch Pro model, which should be more powerful than the original one. This model is pure speculation and discussing it will not be any different from discussing if Switch can run 7 or not, when we don't know a thing about the game. I will admit my opinion regarding the Switch Pro, but this is not the focus of the video. Also, even if we knew how the game is, there were lots of Switch ports that were considered impossible to run on the Switch, yet we have them running. One of our most impossible ports is The Witcher 3. Nobody thought that the Switch would run it, yet here we have it. This section will include facts, but also speculation. I recommend you that if you are not interested in speculation to skip this part. Digital Foundry got the game running close to 60 FPS, raising the Tegra to its max clock speeds. And a clarification regarding that. I wouldn't consider it true overclocking because these clock speeds are still within the operational range of the Tegra X1. Actually, the Nvidia Shield does use those clock speeds. And let me mention that originally the Switch was being tested for 8 days on those high speeds while running demanding demos with millions of fishes and it didn't have issues. And also, Digital Foundry said that the unlocked clock speed Switch was playing The Witcher 3 for tens of hours without any problems, just more noise from the fan. If you are interested, here you can listen to Digital Foundry talking about the temps.
More active cooling, the louder fan. Okay, stock measurements first. After a good deal of gameplay with the Switch running at full pelt, maximum temperature 60 degrees Celsius. Across the same run of play for a very similar duration with CPU at its maximum 1785 MHz, temperatures reached a peak of 64 degrees Celsius. Maximum temperature with both CPU and GPU at max overclock, 67 degrees. Now for reference, the processor will throttle back at around 83 degrees, so yeah, we do have a fair degree of latitude there.
And here you have it. 67 Celsius degrees at max speeds in an intense gaming session. Not an enormous increase from the 60 Celsius degrees from stock clock speeds. The processor throttles back at 83 Celsius degrees, which means Switch has enough room for supporting those speeds. Also, keep in mind that these temperatures are for the Tegra X1 and not the Tegra X1 Plus, which is at 16 nanometers. The X1 Plus will run at even less temperature. And remember again, those speeds were tested on the original Switch for 8 straight days non-stop without any issues. What does all of this mean? Well, basically the Switch has a news power. It has been proven that despite the unlocked clock speed does make the Switch fans work harder, it's still safe. The unlocked clock speeds are used for some games, like Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Odyssey. Mortal Kombat 11 is the only third-party game that uses a 460 MHz clock speed which surpasses the normal Switch limit in handheld. This means Nintendo pushed the Switch power a bit, and Ever Richard from Digital Foundry is wondering if Nintendo will make the speeds to evolve over time, like they did for the 460 MHz speed. He even thinks that maybe they will continue doing this. Here are his words.
So lots of testing here, and I've got some takeaways before I finish up. First of all, I do wonder whether Nintendo is planning an evolving platform here. We've already seen that it's pushing clocks up in select scenarios, and maybe it's just going to continue doing that over time. They can be newer, higher performance profiles for certain games that will still run on a launch Switch like mine, but will result in more noise or shorter battery life when gaming on the go. Less of a problem, of course, for those units running the new processor. I was also surprised to see how often the CPU is the limiting factor. I mean, those Doom tests in particular are quite fascinating. Switch has a quad-core ARM Cortex-A57 cluster, but only 3 cores are available to developers, and they only run at 1020 MHz. Now, even now, developer units can run at 1220 MHz, while obviously compromised units like mine scale all the way up to 1785. Gut feeling, just increasing clocks to 1220 MHz could improve game performance significantly based on the CPU-bound scenarios I've seen so far, and maybe that's something Nintendo will consider in the fullness of time. Clearly the performance...
So basically it's an option for Nintendo to up the clock speeds of the Switch. Richard says that they can make a new high performance profile for the Switch, and this will also run in the older models, of course with a bit more of noise or less battery life when playing off the go, which shouldn't be an issue for the newer Switch models. Richard also says that one consistent bottleneck between games on the Switch is the CPU, and a simple bump from 1 GHz to 1.2 GHz can do some difference. And considering the Switch can handle 1.78 GHz, that little boost seems pretty reasonable. With all of that, it should be more than enough info overall that shows the Switch should be able to handle the Senran Kagura games and basically 7 too. I seriously doubt that 7 will be more demanding than The Witcher 3, which already runs on the Switch standard speeds. Actually, if I compare it to a similar genre game, we can see that Fire Emblem Warriors have better graphics than Senran Kagura games overall. These are a bit more detailed and has better lighting. The models are also more detailed and the enemy count is much higher. Not to mention that the Warrior game also has way bigger map with Shin'en enemies that can spawn in. And since it's a war game, it needs to calculate everything your troops and allies are doing alongside the enemies too. Even the combat that they have, who wins, who loses, etc. Senran Kagura game simply doesn't do anything of that. In the latest release, Burst Renewal, use simple mode in a much smaller linear map in missions. The enemy count is smaller and it doesn't ever let you move freely due to the shinobi barriers. You are locked in a specific map part and you need to defeat the enemies there, then you can move on. After that, the same happens. Another shinobi barrier with some enemies there to defeat, and finally, a boss. I must say that sometimes when you reach the final of the map, you don't actually fight a boss, you just win the mission. Digital Foundry, however, note that Omega Force game dropped performance a lot after the PS2 era, and has a record of not having very good engines. Despite that, Fire Emblem Warriors has a 60 frames per second mode available without mods. It's not quite stable, but it runs well enough, even when the engine is not very good. I can understand that their tech isn't very good, mainly because Irule Warriors, was ported from the Wii U to Switch. The graphics were improved, also the frame rate, but it has a weird lag. Now, the game does run at 1080p in handheld mode. The upscaling bug actually hits the performance when a simple 720p could save those wasted frames and also bring a crystal clear image to the Switch native 720p display. It should be noted that Hino Maruko is a game that looks similar to Senran Kagura. Actually, it does look better graphically. And guess what? It's made by the same Senran developer, Tamsoft, and it's also coming to Switch alongside PS4. Basically, latest Tamsoft games like Hino Maruko and Captain Tsubasa are coming to both the PS4 and Switch, which makes me highly doubt that the hardware couldn't handle a game like Senran Kagura 7. As I said multiple times, Switch still has a lot of unused power due to not reaching its full clock speed. If Nintendo wants, they can still unlock that power for docked mode. What about undocked mode, you say? Well, in my opinion, they can left it as it is. Maybe for some games they can downclock a bit the GPU from its 460 MHz and increase the CPU clock instead, in a new performance profile. Because, as it was said, the CPU tends to be a harder bottleneck than the GPU, and for older models the clocks can't be pushed much more without impacting significantly the battery life. Now, the power gap between docked mode and handheld mode will be bigger than before. As you might notice, the Switch has pretty much a great parity between docked and undocked mode in most games. But, if Nintendo unlocks the docked speed, I feel that this parity might disappear. This doesn't mean that games that are built with the new speeds in mind can't be done on handheld mode, but rather they will suffer a bigger downgrade. Think it like this. Let's put Senran Kagura Stable vs as an example. The game on Switch will run like the PS4 version when docked. This means 1080p at 60 frames per second, full enemy count and also the high quality texture assets. Now, you need to go undock, then the game will run bit-alike. Everything gets cut to half, resolution drop to 540p and frame rate to 30 frames per second, enemy count is reduced and texture assets are also reduced in quality. Of course, this is just an extreme example. Stable vs is not a demanding enough game to receive such a downgrade here. Keep also in mind that the Switch is leagues above the Vita in portable mode, which means that the game will run way better in portable mode than that. As you can see in that example, the game loses parity, but this is still doable after all. That's what I think it could happen. But again, it's just speculation. And also considering that Tamsoft's latest games that are released for the PS4 are also coming to Switch, I fail to see tech issues here. Standard clock speeds are enough. After answering with that, the subject was changed to something like, okay, even if Switch is capable, the Senran Kagura games will need to be downgraded like The Witcher 3 to run. Alright, first let's start saying the games in the technical aspect are pretty simple. Their lighting is pretty basic, and I asked this to a person that has experienced porting assets from the Senran Kagura games to the source engine, which by the way, the engine is more than 10 years old. And not only the lighting but also the physics are very basic. On Stable vs, you can hit a ball and it doesn't even have physics animation. The ball will just move being static in a strong line and it will have a very simple deceleration. This doesn't compare in the slightest with the Havoc physics engine that Breath of the Wild used, for example, and the Boobs physics are just jiggle bones, not any kind of super spectacular physics engine. Okay, so a lack of actual power should be out of the question at this point, especially considering that the graphics of the game are much simpler than Breath of the Wild or even the downgraded Witcher 3 Switch version. I still didn't understand what they meant when they say that graphical downgrade must be done for the Switch be able to run the Senran Kagura games. But at the very last, they ended up giving their true point. The game basically are a tech disaster. I was told by people that Estival Versus actually crashed the PS4 and Vita in its first release views, which it surprised me a bit. But that's not all. The PS4 has more than enough power to run the games with max up settings at 60 frames per second without drops. And it seems that the PS4 doesn't really get a rock solid frame rate on the Senran Kagura games. So, the argument basically is, if the PS4 can do it right, the Switch can't even try. That argument would be valid if, well, the PS4 hardware would be actually maxed up when playing the games. See, this is a clearly poor optimization job. There is no way the PS4 can run this game at 60 stable FPS. The engine is probably bottlenecking in some place and they should look what it's causing the issue. One example would be having the CPU overloaded with stuff. Let's say the floating point capability of the CPU is overloaded with physics, for example. Since the PS4 has compute shader capability, also known as GPU, that can be offloaded from the CPU to the GPU, since nowadays a GPU can do more stuff than just graphics. If they were lazy and just let the CPU do all the work and overload it, then yeah, frames will drop while the GPU is sitting there doing nothing in that regard. The code simply is not well balanced for the hardware. Also, you need to use graphical tricks sometimes to avoid wasting resource. Shin'en is pretty good at this, for example. In an interview, they state that their game Fast Racing Neo, which was a Wii U exclusive, was running at only 15 FPS when they maxed their graphics at the start. They spend the time optimizing the game, doing lots of graphical tricks that will show the same result with just a fraction of the processing costs. Of course, they also offloaded tasks that might be bottlenecking the hardware and voila, 60 butter smooth FPS with the same graphics than the start on the Wii U. Even Digital Foundry was impressed, to the point of saying that Fast Racing Neo would still look amazing in the PS4 and Xbox One with just a resolution boost, and that it was not common to see all these graphics effects in motion at 60 FPS for the Wii U. Optimization can do wonders. And don't think that Shin'en is a big studio, they are actually indie dev, which makes it even more impressive. Now, are you wondering how many people were involved in the game development? Well, I told you that Shin'en wasn't that big, but only 5 persons developed this tech masterpiece. This is what patching or maxing a hardware truly is, not just having a game that drops frames for whatever reason. A good optimization comes when you understand the system's hardware, you know its strength and its weakness, how it is balanced, and you should write your code taking advantage of that. Another thing that comes to play is the creativity you can have when doing the graphics, for example, like Shin'en did. They used graphical tricks to give the same graphics while using less resource. If you combine those practices, the final game will perform very good, otherwise it will run bad. What Tamsoft and maybe Honey Parade did here was just taking the luxury of the PS4 hardware power and develop for it with barely any optimization at all. Maybe because it will just work, it's faster, easier, and probably is also a lower cost. So the games are a technical disaster, that's a problem. But now that I think about it, the 3DS ones did run pretty bad too, except for one. Senran Kagura 2 Deep Crimson is the true sequel to Senran Kagura Burst before Takaki followed Timeline 2 as the new main one. I was hoping that Deep Crimson would run horrible like its predecessor, but no, that was far from being the case. Deep Crimson not only was 60 FPS, a massive change from the 20 FPS like of the older 3DS games, but it has enhanced graphics and better physics overall. Not to mention that it also has full 3D battles. One, for example, is at the start, with the giant Orochi in a wide area. All, at 60 frames per second. Now, I will let here two gameplays of Burst and Deep Crimson. And really, the difference is abysmal. Burst started to drop frames in a really small environment with few enemies wandering around. Or simply, where 3D scenes with special effect kicked in. Now, see how well Deep Crimson runs. It doesn't drop frames and the environments are also more detailed. The enemies can come through and yet the game is still battery smooth. Not enough? Then here you have a full 3D battle with Orochi. The battle happens in a wide area, it has ground destruction when Orochi hits it, and also lots of special effects that on the original burst were simply impossible to pull off. Also, Orochi moves. When even on burst renewal, Orochi simply stands there in the same spot where you simply attack and the stage barely changes. Quite impressive the little 3DS offer a better 3D battle than the more powerful PS4, huh? And here you have how Deep Crimson fares in frame rate compared to the other games. It actually seems to run better than Shinobi Versus on the Vita, making it the smoothest portable Senran game. What I'm trying to say is that even if the games are a tech disaster, that doesn't mean that they can optimize them, and Deep Crimson is a great proof of that, enhancing its predecessor in a pretty big scale. Marvelous can go two routes here. One is the downgraded one, and make the games look like the Vita on Switch, but with enhanced performance since Switch is far more powerful. Or pull up Deep Crimson and have versions that match the PS4 visuals. Actually, the Switch Senran Kagura games use the same assets and some upgraded ones from PBS. There are a bunch of leftover from it, models and even some kind of compiler of the PKG of the PS4 game. Takaki said that PBS is mainly on PS4 and not the Vita due to the capability the PS4 has to represent transparency effects that are present in PBS. I did found something interesting when I was doing some testing with our volunteer Asuka in Pitchfork, all for the science of course. I was trying to get the wet effect on her clothes to see how Switch handled them, and the results are pretty favorable. It matched the PC version, which showed that Switch graphics aren't lagging behind at all. Here comes the interesting bit. Switch Pitchfork game actually has better water effect than the PS4 version of PBS. Here is a comparison between PS4 and Switch. The Switch water effect looks stronger. The water looks more crystal clear compared to the PS4. The PS4 water tries to look more transparent, but it fails. Instead, it looks kind of invisible. Also, the Switch water has more droplets. This will put the Switch graphics for a Senran game slightly above the PS4 version, since PBS is the latest entry that features water in intimacy mode on the PS4, and Switch has better water effects. Of course, the ideal comparison would be having the PS4 running Pitchfork 2, but the game is not available there. So, I will use the PC version with maximum graphics and compare it with Nintendo Switch to see how it stacks up. Here it is both versions, again, PC at max settings. And you can see that Switch matched PC max settings in water and also in transparency and texture quality, so graphic wise, Switch is keeping up. The only difference between the two versions is that PC can run at 60 FPS. Switch can actually do that too, with a CPU pumped to 1.2 GHz. If the game were titled in 60 FPS on Switch, it should be able to achieve it with some CPU optimization. On the other hand, it would be nice for Nintendo to unlock the full speed of a Tera, not only for the developers that can take advantage of that, but also for games that get heavily improved with the speed. They can do a kind of boost mode similar to what the PS4 Pro has, using the Tegra max clock speeds on the dock when enabled and improve game performance like Pitchfork here. Basically, get it to run at 60 FPS without the need of the developer to spend time optimizing the game to achieve this. Taking account what we saw earlier in the game files, Reflection has pretty much PBS files, and the icon placeholder could mean that Reflection is derived from the PBS engine. All these files are present in Pitchfork as well, so we can say that actually Pitchfork is running in an updated PBS engine. This doesn't mean that it has the whole engine there, but a good chunk should be. And with this, the power debate is pretty much concluded. There shouldn't be any doubts now that the Switch hardware is capable of running the games at their full potential. Maybe some optimization will be needed, but that's what it was done in Deep Crimson. Marvelous could simply go and make another game performing like Burst or even worse considering how Deep Crimson is, and they chose not to. And we are talking of that even when Shinobi Versus was already released on PS Vita and was a success. Also, it's a more powerful console. If they wanted, they could do the lazy job and just get the game running on Vita, without having to go the trouble of optimizing the game for weaker hardware like the 3DS. And with all of this, I come to the conclusion that the Switch hardware is not a problem. Really guys, the Wii era where the power gap between the Wii and PS3 was so huge happened a long time ago. The gap between the PS4 and Switch is much narrow, and while Nintendo hardware is not the most powerful compared to the other home consoles, the power is still decent. And again, remember that the Switch is running much more complex games than the Senran Kagura games. This includes Breath of the Wild, Fire Emblem Warriors, Hyrule Warriors, Hino Maruko. This last one is even from Tamsoft and have enhanced graphics compared to the Senran Kagura games, and it's also coming to the Switch alongside the PS4. Also, who knows, maybe they are using bits of the engine for Senran Kagura 7 in case they are the developers of said game, which should tell that 7 is completely doable on Switch, and the game list simple can go on. And remember, the Switch is heavily capped on power. It's pretty much safe to have the Switch running with its max CPU and GPU clock speeds. Nintendo can unlock part of all this power at any time. And don't forget about the rumored more powerful Switch model that's coming. And to end this once and for all, remember that the Senran Kagura games does use a very simple engine. The ball you kick has pretty basic physics for ocean and looks very simple. The graphics themselves are pretty simple too, and lacks any complex lighting. The source engine from more than 13 years ago does quite better graphics and lighting. The models in Senran Kagura aren't photorealistic and lacks an excessive amount of polygons or material of that kind. The scenarios aren't quite big and even they get locked by a Shinobi barrier. Also, the enemy count is not low but not extremely high either. Tamsoft has demonstrated that they can optimize their game well. Deep Crimson clearly shows that, so it's pretty much possible for them to pull another big reason and optimize the game for the Switch. The difference between burst and decreasing is abysmal. Let's assume that even with all of that, the game ends up downgraded on Switch. Well, for those that always want maximum graphics no matter what, you have the Steam version. PC will be ahead of anything a console can offer from a tech point. My PC, for example, is not even high-end, yet it smokes both my PS4 and Switch combined when it comes to power. So, in that version you will rest assured knowing that graphics will not be a problem. And declare this topic pretty much settled. Let's move to another one. Some people ask about reasons from a business perspective to do the movement to Nintendo Switch, and there are many. The most obvious one is what we talked earlier in the video. Nintendo doesn't actually restrict third parties in their games. Burst Renewal was censored on the PS4, removing stuff like intimacy mode. Nintendo didn't put restrictions to Takaki and Co., and Takaki even did say that in the past for the 3DS games. There are even other games that have more features on Switch also, like Lower Keys. So, no censorship is one important reason. 7 can even be released thanks to the censor, and not to mention the cost and delay that censoring involves. Also, the censorship policies at the time made MadWorld reduce its sales forecast for an announced game, since they were forced to remove some elements from it. Also, censored games sell less. Nobody likes censorship, that's something we know, and sales speak by themselves. We have here Omega Labyrinth Life, which get its version uncensored on Nintendo Switch, and it sold more than 3 times the PS4 version. Want to know what's better? The PS4 version was cheaper, and yet it sold far less, which means players vote with their wallet saying we don't want censorship. Oh, and for those wondering, the game runs on 1080p and 60 FPS, just like the PS4 version, and on portable it runs at the native screen resolution of the Switch, with same frame rate, 720p and 60 FPS. The same story did happen with Lower Keys. The game had more uncensored features on Nintendo Switch, and this version sold more than the PS4 version. Another point is that the Switch is already selling better than the PS4, in Japan and at worldwide scale. It shouldn't be news to anyone that Switch is selling well, to the point that outsold the PS4 in Japan in less than half of time of life. At this point, Switch already has a huge sales advantage compared to the PS4. Switch sold over 12 million units versus the PS4, which doesn't even reach 9 million units yet. Again, the PS4 has a more than 3 years time advantage compared to the Switch, so this is quite impressive. Not everything is good news though, since Switch sales are being affected due to the coronavirus. Remember when Switch lotteries to buy one were around because Nintendo couldn't keep up with the high demand? They are back, thanks to the coronavirus. Switch sales will probably slow down here, and not only in Japan, but it seems that there will be problems in the US and Europe too. However, if we look at the sales up to now, the Switch sold better worldwide than the PS4 in the same amount of time. On slightly more than 3 years, the PS4 sold 50 million units worldwide. On the other hand, Switch in 2 years and 9 months sold more than 52 million units worldwide. The problem here is that sales will probably be affected due to the coronavirus, but so far you can clearly see that Switch has a sales lead. This is something important to keep in mind. The sales of the platform are pretty big, and that makes sense from a business perspective to develop for it. Other point to consider is the current sales of the Senran games on Switch, and they are good. Reflection, for example, sold 50,000 units on January 17th in 2018, a pretty good number. It managed to stay on top selling on the Nintendo eShop, so we can say that the game was a success. On the other hand, we have Peach Ball Senran Kagura. This game didn't sell as well as Reflection, it would seem. However, its sales aren't bad either. Let's see. At its debut, It was reported by Media Create that the game has sold 40% of its stock. Those sales aren't bad, they are decent. However, there is some stuff that should be noted here. Let's start that this is another Takaki experiment. Pinball is not very popular in Japan, and Takaki acknowledged that. He says that he was curious to see how people would react to this. Of course, this can keep some risk of maybe making a product that doesn't really appeal to the fans and have lower sales. Also, the release date of the game was pretty close to bigger releases like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This can totally eclipse the game, and it would have been more wise to release it when Switch doesn't have any big games incoming. One example will be on January of 2020, the biggest closer game that's coming to Switch released in March 20, which is Animal Crossing New Horizons. Another thing is that the game cost $40, which is expensive for what the game actually is. You should consider that for the same price you can get Burst Renewal, which has the most polished combat, or Estival Versus, which has far more characters and it's even $10 cheaper. Heck, even Shinobi Versus is at $20, and Deep Crimson retails below the $40 mark too. And we are talking about the true Senran Kagura games, not spin-off. In my personal opinion, the right price for a game should be about $20. Keeping in mind all of this, I think I can hardly say that the game sold bad. Not to mention that shortly after it was reported that the game actually did better. The physical copies become hard to find, and some shops apologized with the sold out, saying that they were selling more than it was expected. So, Marvelous has some experience with the games on the platform, and a positive one to be honest. With that said, there is another thing to look from the business perspective, and that's the cost of moving the game to Switch. From my own point of view, the fact that Nintendo doesn't have a problem letting this kind of games in is more than enough of a reason to release the game on Switch if the PS4 is making the development so hard. But, to mitigate the cost, they can actually open up a crowdfunding campaign, doing basically what Platinum Games did for the Wonderful 101. The Wonderful situation is not entirely clear, but it seems Nintendo owns at least a part of it. So, Platinum asked if they could go multi-platform, in which Nintendo said it was okay, but they will not put any money for that. And here we are. We have the crowdfunding campaign and it was a massive success. If costs are one of the concerns Marvelous has, this route can pretty much help with it. Furthermore, if they need a bigger budget for optimization and improving the engine, this will help too. Platinum also states something that was interesting. By making the funding campaign, they can actually gauge how much interest people have, and since they are putting money, that's showing a lot of compromise. If Marvelous are also looking to see if fans like the series and want to keep it alive, then this is a quite interesting option. I still feel that even if they focus on the Switch and Steam version, a censored PS4 version can still be done in case they don't want to cancel the work they already have done there. They can first finish the Switch and Steam version and then start cutting content for the PS4 version. There are a lot of stuff that can be done to manage to release the game on the PS4. They can for example censor frantic mode. The clothes get destroyed in the mode, so what about having the same mode without the clothes destruction part? It will just look as a powered up version of the character, nothing lewd. Shinobi transformation, remove the cutscene completely. Intimacy, do the same as Burst Renewal. Jiggle bones, heck no, disable that. Cloak tearing, nope, turn it off like Burst Renewal actually lets users to do it. Some scene that looks suggestive, you can do all this change and I'm pretty sure that Sony will allow the game to get released on the PS4, similar to what Omega Labyrinth Life actually did with the PS4 and Switch. This is just an alternative for Marvelous if they don't want to cancel the work already done on the PS4 and avoid losses on that side. I feel this is the best approach, because not only you get to release the game on the PS4 and also more platforms, but also you give Takaki the freedom to continue doing what he wants. So, You get more sales from the multiple platforms, more users can enjoy the game in its favorite platform, and Takaki can work in peace. Also, who knows? There were third-party games that actually did feature Nintendo-themed stuff, like Skyrim, Rocket League, and remember also the Bayonetta costumes. So yes, these are some reasons I give for Marvelous. I think that I did pretty much talk about everything here. Currently, there is a petition going on at the start of a movement for the Switch and Steam development to happen. There are a lot of Senran Kagura community that support it, and we need to bring the most attention possible to this. Regarding the attention, I did speak with Marvelous Europe on Twitter regarding this, and here's a comment. They are very transparent with their stuff, they are honest with subject and reply to most user questions. Naturally, I talked to them about getting Senran Kagura 7 on Switch, and they did reply. They said that they aren't involved with the development, but that I can talk about it with Marvelous Inc., which is the main branch, since Marvelous Europe does mainly localization work. After that, I did ask if a question should have done in Japanese, and yeah, that was the case. They said they passed the feedback to its contacts, but the most interesting part is that sometimes it's best to see it from the fans as well, encouraging to talk to the Japanese branch. And that's what I did. I sent an email to them about this, and to be honest, I wasn't expecting replies at all. Mainly, some months ago, I sent an email to Spike Chunsoft asking if they were going to release Danganronpa on Nintendo Switch. I told them some motives like portability can fit pretty well and that visual novels were selling good on the system. They never replied back. And with Marvelous Japan I did something similar. I asked them about bringing Senran Kagura 7 on the Nintendo Switch due to the censor issues the game was currently having on the PS4, since those restrictions aren't present on Switch. And my Japanese was too broken really, I didn't even brought Senran Kagura well. The Spike mail can be sent in English compared to Marvelous that can be only in Japanese. Also note that in the page it says that they will not reply to some topics. But I waited anyway, and after a few days, yep, you guessed it, I got a reply. Now, for some reason, they don't want the email content to be copied, published, forwarded, etc. So I can't sadly show it. But they say something in the line that they can't say anything right now on the matter. But thanked me for the feedback. If you want to see the answer, you can email them on their page asking if they could release the game on Switch and they will probably answer too. They could just ignore my mail like Spike did, but that wasn't the case. And since Marvelous Europe told me to ask the Japanese branch, it's clearly that they are seeing how fan demand is. Especially but that quote that sometimes it's best to see it from the fans as well. So yeah, in my experience, I can say they are actually seeing if there is enough fan demand. Now comes the most important questions to all of this. What we can do? And will it work? Well, we need to have a fan base as big as possible with this, all committed to the same goal. If we manage to form it and make enough noise, there is a possibility that Marvelous will react, since they never close the doors. The petition already has a bit more than 1000 signs, which is a good number, but we need to also use more than just the petition. Also, keep in mind that in 2021 it will be the 10th anniversary of Senran Kagura, so this is a good time to start moving. So, what we can do? One thing is to sign in the current petition. This was the first step for the movement and it went fine. However, this is not enough. Talking with Marvelous Europe, they said that the best is to contact the Japanese branch themselves or Honey Parade Games. As I showed earlier, I contacted Marvelous Japan and got an answer on the topic. Don't be afraid to show your interest to them on the matter with an email. You can ask them if they have plans to release the game on Nintendo Switch since the PS4 has regulation issues. Things to note: the email needs to be in Japanese. Thankfully, Google Translator seems to be enough, but it is better if you are aware of the errors of the translator and you correct them. This might sound obvious, but just send the email once, don't spam them. Once you get a reply, then it means they are aware of your interest on the game, and you pretty much did your part here. Now, I looked for email address of Honey Parade, but sadly I didn't find anything. If you find their email, don't hesitate to email them too. There is still more stuff to do here, aside the petition and the formal contact with MadWorld. We can do some noise in social media. Persona 5 is not facing any kind of development issue, but people anyway did the pre-free Persona movement to show that there is interest on getting Persona 5 on Nintendo Switch, and it got trending. Ari Advincula from Atlus encouraged fans, telling them to fight out for Persona 5 on Nintendo Switch, and that way, brick-free Persona was born. Granted, Persona 5 is much popular than Senran Kagura, I'm fully aware of that, but if we really want to keep the series alive, we must explore and use each possibility that's available. So, what we can do here is use a hashtag. We can use the hashtag 7for_Switch. Here, post your Senran related tweets and stuff in other media using it. You can tell why you like the series or why you want 7 to get released. If you are a content creator, you can do a video about it using the hashtag. You can share or create your own fanart for it, post your gameplay of the games, maybe post your general ideas to add new concepts on the games. There are even Discord servers being created just for that. Your merchandise, everything counts. Just use the hashtag like it was shown here, so we have all our content unified in just one place. We can also tweet the official Senran Kagura account too. I'm not sure if tweeting the account will work, but like I said, we need to explore every possibility. Also, it keeps the hashtag active. You ask about tweeting Marvelous Europe and XXX accounts? Don't bother with that. I mean, yeah, they have their contacts and all, but their main job is to localize games. They are not directly involved with development, thus they can't take decisions regarding the platform where the game will arrive, or simply put, development itself. I don't think we will be making progress there. You may also ask about tweeting Kenichiro Takaki, but I'm hesitating about it. Firstly, he may still be one of the producers of Senran Kagura games, but that doesn't mean he has full control of the project. He's probably working within a budget set by Marvelous to Honey Parade Games. Sure, with it seems enough for them to release it on PC and scrap the PS4 version, but again, he said that in his eyes, the game will get eclipsed and it's too niche for a PC only release. From my point of view, the budget is not enough to move the game to PC and Switch, otherwise I feel they would have announced the platform switching already. So, one would simply think that tweeting him will barely change a thing, since it would still be up to Marvelous to increase Honey Parade Games' budget to do the porting to PC and Switch. Takaki in that case will not be able to do much more than just kindly asking Marvelous to increase their budget for the development. But remember, we are tweeting him using our hashtag 7for_Switch, which is our movement from Senran Kagura 7, and one proposed solution to this is to follow an approach similar to what Platinum Games did with the wonderful 101. The budget will come from funding of the fans themselves, so if budget is a problem, this can certainly help. And why I'm hesitating with this? Mainly, we don't want to get his account spammed. Not only will make things worse, but also we don't want him to become Kamiya 2.0. So please, if you're going to tweet him with the hashtag, do it kindly and respectful. Include some fanart just to avoid making empty message and to make them look nice. And attention to this, just do it once. Don't spam him at all. If someone gets an answer from him, don't hesitate to post it on the SIA Discord server, the Senran Kagura subreddit, any place where people can notice that he already answered, so you don't need to tweet him anymore. And that's all I have to say, folks. The only question that's not answered yet is, will it work? It depends. It depends on how much noise we can do with this, how much as fans we are committed to this movement. Sure, there is always a chance to fail. Success is never guaranteed, but we need to try anyway. Atlus Ari Advincula said for the case of Persona 5 on Switch that fans need to express their desire and fight to make it happen. She also encouraged fans to don't lose hope, and I agree with that. Persona and Senran Kagura are two whole different things. I know, but I think that Advincula's word for the fans' desire perfectly fits here. And remember, guys and girls, the next year, 2021, it will be the 10th Senran Kagura anniversary. This year, and especially the next one, we need to express our wishes. It really is our golden ticket to show all of our interest on the series. And apologize about the part that I said I will be talking about Senran Kagura series overall. The video surpassed the hour and I had to cut content. But I will still speak about my thoughts on the series on another video, of course using our hashtag. Thanks for watching everyone. Remember to post your Senran stuff with the hashtag 7for_Switch. Let's show Marvelous and Takaki our interest in the series, and that we want Takaki to properly finish it. That's all folks, see you later.
Baby.